Hey guys, what's going on? This is Fred2266 here, and I'm here once again to read another story in the series of what I'm calling the cream of the crop. That's right, if you have not heard, the rest of July is going to be dedicated to reading some of the most popular stories in the fandom. Now, you may be asking, what constitutes as popular, Fred? Well, many things such as over 500 likes on fanfiction, if a story has its own page on Equestria Daily or its own page on the MLP Wikia, or if it's been featured on Equestria Daily. Just so happens, this story right here has over 500 likes. 300 likes on fanfiction. Has over 500 actually. It's been featured on Equestria Daily, has its own page on Equestria Daily. I don't know if it has its own page on the MLP Wikia. I was too lazy to check, but it probably does. So that means it's triple, perhaps quadruple, popular. Now, a popular fanfiction does not mean it's been featured once on a fanfiction featured story list at the main hub of the site. No, that's called a flash in the pan story. A popular story is something that people can go back to over and over and read anytime. Maybe they just want to cry, have a nice laugh, or just depends on the tags, or just go back and read a story that they read before, a long time ago, and they really loved, and they just want to read it again. That's what a popular story is. You can keep coming back to it. It never loses its value. It's reading. It's rereadable, basically. That's what this fan fiction is. Pretty in Pink by Olivia Aurora. Aizka read it. I listened to it. I read it myself. And the great thing is, this is one of only two fan fictions to ever make me cry. The first one being Milo Dashi, which was the first story I read in the Cream of the Crop series, which I did yesterday. Now I'm doing Pretty in Pink. Only two fan fictions to make me cry. This is one of them. Now that's not a bad thing. Like I've said, you don't have to cry at a story to know that's sad. I'm just saying, it's made me cry. So that constitutes as being powerful, and I think it is powerful. The great thing is, it's way shorter than Milo Dashi. It's not even 3,000 words. So that's a testament to how powerful it is. It's so short, but yet it's so great. So I consider it popular, so I'm going to read it right now. Pretty in Pink by Olivia Aurora. If I cry, we'll see if I cry, because I've listened to the story once and read it once. Milo Dashi listened to it twice and read it once. So I didn't cry Milo Dashi, so maybe this story still has that value, make me cry. I hope so, because it adds to the story, I believe. It was winter time, but any holiday cheer would have been in its tasteful irony. There was nothing to be happy about. Something was missing. A facet of life in Ponyville. Something I had always taken for granted. I never even considered that one day I might be without it. This facet took the form of a keen and bubbly mare who always wore a smile, and made a point to share that smile with every pony. But she no longer wore a smile. Her eyes were closed, and she was almost frowning. It was unnatural for her, and when I spun the thoughts around in my mind, I didn't like the conclusions I drew. There would be no more parties. There would be no more giggling. In fact, Ponyville would be lucky if any pony was ever happy again. My heart clouded over from the snowstorm of emotion. After the procession, I sat in the library for what felt like hours, just sitting there, staring at the floor, avoiding thinking at all costs. At that point, thinking would have been rather masochistic, if not suicidal. There was too much to think about, and no good could have been drawn from thinking about it. Not even Rainbow Dash could clear the cloud that hung over Ponyville. But try as I might to rid all my mind of semblance of thought, I couldn't keep the gears from turning. My mind wasn't conditioned to a lack of thought. I gave up and allowed myself to process it all. It was all so sudden. This first inevitable thought entered my mind, and I let it run. One day she was the same giggly ball phone who I'd spent nearly every day of my life in Ponyville with. Then the next day, she was... I couldn't think any longer. I pushed all my thoughts away as the tears began to flow. I lay flat on the floor with my teeth gritted, sobbing. I remained there for the rest of the evening, barely conscious. I hardly noticed when Spike gently lifted my head and put a pillow underneath. I only half noticed when a minute later he laid a blanket over me. I should have noticed sooner, was the last thought that crossed my mind before sleep gripped me. The next morning I woke up, feeling dead inside. The chill of the winter weather had penetrated my heart. I lay in the same spot for several hours that morning. My body seemed to think that if I didn't do anything that day, perhaps the day just wouldn't happen at all. It was wishful thinking. That became clear when a soft tap at the door caught my attention. Then a voice followed. "Twy, can I come in?" I still stayed where I was for lack of energy, willpower, or any semblance of motivation. So my steed, Spike, opened the door. Applejack wandered in and took a seat next to me. "I just want to talk, is all. I've been getting a mite restless, and I thought talking over might do us both some good." I grunted in acknowledgement. "I's just... no pony saw it coming. She must have known, but she didn't tell any pony." "I can only wonder why." I grunted again in acknowledgement. Applejack seemed frustrated at this. "Well, my help you are. Honestly, all I want to do is talk in here. You can't even hardly put in a word, too." Applejack got up and went back outside. A moment later I heard Rarity's voice. The two of them were talking. A second later, Rarity came in. "Come on, get up." "Why?" I barely mumbled the question. "We're not going to let you sit here and rot from your own depression. Some fresh air will do you good." I still refused to get up, so Rarity cast a levitation spell. "Come on, we're leaving." Against my will, I was magically dragged outside. "Where are you taking me?" I again mumbled. Rarity, instead of replying, sighed. "You still have friends, Twilight. Being one pony short does not justify neglecting the rest. We all need to cope, but if any coping is to be done, we need you to be here with us. And you know what else, Twilight?" "What?" I asked, hardly caring, but humoring her anyway. "You need us there with you." "That's a fact." I was silent for the rest of the trip. The loneliness of the cold blinded me to my companions. Sugar Cube Corner was a bittersweet sight. Even more bittersweet was the fact that the rest of my friends stood there, but the frizzy mane bouncing blur of pink was not among them. I closed my eyes and tried to shut it all out. "Twilight, you need to stand up." "Now," I heard Rarity's voice say. I scoffed silently. Easy enough for the independent one to say. "Twy, I can honestly say I didn't expect you to crumble so easy-like. Of course the farm pony would know all about keeping one's composure." "Twilight, come on! She wants us to move on. She'd hate to see us suffer for her." "Pfft, yeah, Rainbow Dash. The pony that was never fazed by anything. She would say that." "Be strong, Twilight." My eyes opened wide. That last one was Fluttershy. Even Fluttershy, the most emotionally fragile pony I knew, was standing up tall. Even Fluttershy, the frail and tender Pegasus who was afraid of everything, was looking her emotions in the eye and staring them down, daring them to consume her. Even Fluttershy. I realized then and there that I was an absolute mess. I closed my eyes and gritted my teeth again, preparing for the tears. Rarity released her levitation spell and I fell to the ground with a loud, light thud. With this, I was pulled away from my emotions for a moment by what I felt around me. The ground. I hadn't noticed earlier, but there was a light snow on the ground. Of course, I thought. It's winter. Winter. The thought processed for a moment, after which I took a deep breath and stood up, tears in my eyes but a weak smile across my face. Any pony want to go ice skating? In the midst of icy despair, my heart began to thaw. We all found skates and picked out a lake that had good solid ice. Rarity was absolutely right. The fresh air was like breathing in pure adrenaline. I was awake. I felt aware. The tears that had long since crusted over in my eyes were dry. I felt like everything would be alright, and that the one who wouldn't be with us would be smiling down at us just knowing that we were doing what she always encouraged. Having fun with each other. I was just as horrible at skating as I was the previous time, during my first winter wrap-up experience. But this time, I was able to laugh at my mistakes. This time, I didn't have any goal to accomplish or task to complete. This time, trying was all that mattered. But there was still a fragment of that feeling at the pit of my stomach. I knew that my late friend would have wanted to be here for this, to be the one showing me how to skate. It still tore me up a bit that she didn't get a chance to at least do that. After an hour or so of skating and copious amounts of tear-ridden giggling, we all headed over to Sweet Apple Acres, where Applejack had a roaring fire going and apple pies baking in the oven. "Glad to see you've come around, Twy," Applejack commented as she poured cider for all of us. "I was worried about you." I sipped the warm cider gingerly. The transition from cool, fresh air to warm, welcoming cider worked wonders on my mind. Thanks, Applejack. I paused for a moment to take another sip. It was upsetting to me particularly. When I was just a filly, Princess Celestia told me that I had more latent talents waiting to be uncovered. One of those talents was supposedly the ability to see the future. And so in the back of my mind this entire time, I've been wondering why that latent ability couldn't have surfaced sooner. If I could have foreseen what was going to happen, I might have... Okay, maybe I couldn't have prevented it, but I could have made her last weeks more enjoyable. More fun. More... something at least. You know, Twilight, Fluttershy cut in, if you really feel bad about it, there's one thing you could do to get it off your mind. Oh? And what's that? You could talk to Nurse Redheart and ask her for details. I'm sure she'll tell you what you want to know. I mulled this over. It did seem like a good idea. There was the slightest hint of dread, but I ignored that. I finished my cider, partook in some apple pie, and thanked Applejack for everything before leaving to find Nurse Redheart's office. In my heart, the sun crept over the clouds. So, what's the issue? I asked Nurse Redheart. So, what was the issue? I asked Nurse Redheart. Almost wasn't sure she heard me. My voice was dry and cracked. I suspected it didn't want me to talk. In the back of my mind, I was terrified of what the answer might be. Nevertheless, Nurse Redheart responded a moment later with a sigh. She came in about 2 years ago, asking about some symptoms she was having. Well, as it would turn out, she was very ill. I told her she had a year to live. Upon hearing this, she told me not to tell any pony until she was gone. That was the winter of 2 years ago. But then the summer, and a year and a half ago, she met you, and she began to get strong again. I don't much specialize in psychology, but I suspect that your presence in her life gave her something to live for. Her heart no longer beat for herself, but for somebody else. Twilight, I think the friendship you offered her prolonged her life greatly. After this, Nurse Redheart paused, and her demeanor changed slightly. When she spoke again, there was an air of bitterness. But then you changed, Twilight. You began to tire of her antics. You misinterpreted her desperate cry for help as her hyperactivity, and pretended not to notice. That upset her. She couldn't make you smile anymore, and if her friends weren't smiling, she had no reason to smile either. She lost her will to live, because you passed her actions off as just her typical silliness. Twilight Sparkle, you killed Pinkie Pie. I stepped back, a pace in shock. What? What are you saying? You brought about the end of her life, plain and simple. By neglecting her, you failed to prolong her life, and so in essence, you killed her. No! I never neglected her! I always appreciated her optimism and carefree attitude. You took her for granted. You made her feel unappreciated and unloved. All that time you kept telling yourself, she's just being Pinkie Pie, but you never bothered to understand why. I had no response. I was completely taken aback by these accusations. But the worst part of it was that it all rang true. Before I could ponder this thought, however, Nurse Redheart continued, Celestia's favorite student, with the latent ability to foresee the future. How did you know about that? If only you had seen it this time. You might have appreciated Pinkie Pie and undone damage before it was too late. She gave a shudder and began to change shape. You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. She grew taller, and her shadow enveloped the room. You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. Her face grew darker. You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. Her voice twisted in a demonic tone. You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. At that moment, I hear a distant voice. It sounded like Pinkie saying, Wake up! Wake up, Twilight! You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. Wake up, Twilight! You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. Wake up, Twilight! You killed her, Twilight Sparkle. Twilight, wake up! I woke with a start. It was no longer winter, but rather midsummer. I was confused, and it took me a moment to get my bearings, but that moment was still working itself through when I heard a pounding at the front door, and a subsequent blur of a pony zooming through it. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up! Pinkie Pie was bouncing around the room excitedly. I blinked the drowsiness out of my eyes and tried to comprehend what was going on. It never happened, I thought. It was all a dream. I inhaled steeply, and let out a difficult breath. A dream maybe, but definitely not fiction. I thought it all through. There was nothing made up about our relationship, I realized. I had very much been taking Pinkie Pie for granted.